The chalk hit the board like a gunshot. Every head in the lecture hall snapped forward. Not because of the sound. Because of what followed it. 63 students watching a 58-year-old professor turn from the board and point directly at the one person in the room he had already decided didn't belong there. You. Professor Jean Merritt's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Mr. Carter. Elijah Carter looked up from his notebook. He was 19 years old, sitting in the third row of advanced number theory at Caldwell University, wearing a gray hoodie that had seen better days, surrounded by students who had not once spoken to him in 3 weeks. He had a habit of arriving early, sitting quietly, and leaving without a word. He had learned early in life that invisibility was sometimes the safest strategy. Today it failed him. "Since you've decided to grace us with your presence again," Merritt said, his Korean-accented English precise and clipped, each syllable delivered like a verdict, "perhaps you'd like to demonstrate what you've been doing with your time, other than occupying a seat." A few students shifted uncomfortably. Most didn't. Most had seen Merritt do this before. The slow, surgical targeting of someone he had already written off. They had learned to watch and say nothing. Elijah set his pen down. "I've been studying, Professor." Studying. Merritt repeated the word the way a judge repeats a defendant's alibi. He turned back to the board and wrote. Not a simple equation. Not a warm-up problem. What he wrote made 3 students in the front row lean forward with their mouths slightly open, because what Professor Merritt had just put on that board was something most of them had only seen referenced in graduate-level papers, a problem from the upper tier of advanced number theory that had sat unsolved in academic literature for over 30 years. A problem with a name. The Caldwell constant problem. A problem that Merritt himself had built a career and a reputation around. A problem he used every semester as a wall, not to teach, but to remind students exactly where the ceiling was. He set the chalk down and turned around. Solve it. The room went so quiet Elijah could hear the ventilation system above his head. He didn't move immediately. He looked at the board. Then he looked at Merritt. And in that moment something happened that nobody in that room could quite explain afterward. The nervous energy that had been sitting in Elijah's jaw, in his shoulders, in the careful way he'd been holding himself for 3 weeks, went completely still. Not the stillness of someone shrinking. The stillness of someone who had just recognized something familiar. He stood up. Merritt's eyebrow moved a fraction of an inch. Elijah walked to the front of the room and picked up the chalk. He felt 63 pairs of eyes on his back. He felt Merritt's gaze like a hand pressed between his shoulder blades. He looked at the equation, and for exactly 4 seconds he didn't write anything. Then he started. What happened in the next 94 seconds would be described differently by everyone who witnessed it. Some said it looked effortless. Some said it looked like he was copying something down from memory, the chalk moving with a speed and certainty that didn't match a student encountering a problem for the first time. One student, Priyan Wosu, sitting in the second row, would later say that it felt like watching someone unlock a door they'd had the key to their whole life. The solution that appeared on that board was not the standard approach. It was not any approach currently in academic literature. It was lateral, compressed, almost architectural in the way it moved, and it was completely, undeniably correct. Elijah set the chalk down. He turned around. The room was frozen. Merritt stood at the side of the board staring at the solution with an expression that had started as amusement and was now something Elijah couldn't fully name. Something tied around the eyes, something that looked almost like recognition, almost like alarm, almost like a man who had just heard a voice he thought he'd buried long ago. "Where?" Merritt said quietly. "Did you get that method?" "I worked it out," Elijah said. "Just now." "Yes." Merritt looked at the board again. Then at Elijah. The silence stretched 4 seconds too long. "Sit down, Mr. Carter." Elijah walked back to his seat. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Priyan Wosu stared at the solution on the board, then at Elijah's back, then at Professor Merritt's face, and something about the way Merritt was looking at that board made her stomach drop without knowing why. Elijah opened his notebook and picked up his pen. His hand was steady. But his heart was hammering so hard he could feel it in his throat, because what he had just written on that board was not something he had worked out in 94 seconds. It was something he had grown up with. Something written in a dead man's handwriting in a set of notebooks that sat in a shoebox under his bed. Something his father had created 30 years ago in this very building, in this very department, before this university had taken everything from him and left a young woman to raise a child alone on the belief that the truth would eventually matter. Elijah had just shown his hand. And from the look on Merritt's face, Merritt knew exactly what hand it was. The question now wasn't whether Elijah was brilliant enough to survive what came next. The question was whether he'd just made the worst mistake of his life by walking into the same trap that had swallowed his father whole. 3 rows back, a student was already pulling out his phone. By the time the lecture ended, a video was uploading. By midnight, Caldwell University had a problem it didn't know how to contain. And Professor Merritt was sitting alone in his office, staring at a 30-year-old publication with his name on it, listening to the particular silence of a man who knows exactly what's coming and has no idea how to stop it. The video hit 10,000 views before sunrise. Elijah didn't sleep. He sat on the edge of his bed in his small off-campus apartment, the shoebox open beside him, one of his father's notebooks spread across his knees. The handwriting was dense, cramped, urgent, the handwriting of a man who wrote like he was afraid of running out of time. Which, as it turned out, he was. Elijah had read these notebooks so many times the pages had softened at the corners. He knew every equation, every margin note, every place where his father had crossed something out and written no, think deeper in the space beside it. He knew the solution he had written on that board today existed in these pages dated October 12, 1994. He knew it the way he knew his own name. What he hadn't known, what he had spent 19 years not fully understanding, was what it would feel like to write it in front of the man who stole it. His phone vibrated. Then again. Then 4 times in rapid succession. He looked at the screen. Notifications from a thread he hadn't started, on a platform he barely used, under a video he hadn't filmed. Someone in that lecture hall had recorded him. Not the whole 94 seconds. Just the end. Just Merritt's face. Just the silence. Just the equation on the board and the professor staring at it like a man who had seen a ghost. The caption read, "This professor tried to embarrass a black student with an unsolvable problem. Watch what happened." Elijah put the phone face down on the mattress. He looked at the notebook. He looked at the photo on his nightstand, a man in graduation robes, young, smiling, standing in front of a building Elijah now walked past every single day. Marcus Carter. Caldwell University, class of 1995. A man who never made it to graduation. A man who had filed a complaint, been ignored, been expelled, been blacklisted, and 3 years later had decided the world was better without him in it, leaving behind a wife, a 2-year-old son, and a shoebox full of notebooks that the university had never once asked to see. Elijah picked up the phone again. He had 14 missed calls. 12 were from numbers he didn't recognize. One was from his mother, Dorinda Carter, who lived 4 hours away and had probably seen the video the same way everyone else had. Sideways, on a phone screen, in the middle of the night, heart in her throat. The last call was from a campus extension he didn't recognize at all. He called his mother first. She picked up on the first ring. Elijah. Her voice was the kind of quiet that meant she had been awake for hours. "Tell me you know what you're doing." "I know what I'm doing. Because what you just put on that board, I know, Mom, is the same thing that destroyed your father." The sentence landed in the room like something dropped from a height. Neither of them spoke for a moment. Outside, a car passed on the street below. Somewhere in the building a door closed. "He didn't get destroyed because of the math," Elijah said carefully. "He got destroyed because he was alone when they came for him." "I'm not going to be alone." Dorinda Carter made a sound that wasn't quite agreement and wasn't quite argument. It was the sound of a woman who had spent 17 years trying to protect her son from the exact moment she had just watched arrive on a phone screen. "There's a woman," she finally said. "At Caldwell. In the math department. She knew your father." Her name is Dr. Amara Osei. I never told you about her because I didn't want you going looking for any of this. But if you're already in it, she stopped. She reached out to me once. Years ago. Said if anything ever happened, if you ever needed. Do you have her number? A pause. I have her office extension. It was the same campus number on his missed calls list. Elijah was out of the apartment by 7:15 in the morning, the notebook tucked under his arm, moving across a campus that was already humming with something he could feel but not see, the particular energy of a place that has woken up to a story it doesn't yet know how to categorize. Students he had never spoken to looked at him as he passed. 2 of them pointed. 1 took a photo. He kept walking. Dr. Amara Osei's office was on the 4th floor of the mathematics building, at the end of a corridor lined with framed portraits of faculty members dating back to the 1970s. Elijah walked past them slowly, scanning. He stopped at a portrait near the end. Professor Merritt, taken approximately 15 years ago, looking directly at the camera with the settled confidence of a man who had never once been questioned. Beneath the portrait, a small brass plate. Merritt Chair of Advanced Mathematics. Established 1997. Elijah stared at it for a long moment. Then he knocked on Dr. Osei's door. Come in. She was smaller than he'd expected. 50s, natural hair shot through with gray, reading glasses pushed up on her forehead, a desk buried under papers and journals. She looked up when he entered and something moved across her face immediately. Not surprise, but recognition, the kind that comes from seeing a face you've been half expecting for a long time. You look like him, she said. Elijah closed the door behind him. You knew my father. I did. She took her glasses off entirely and set them on the desk. Sit down, Elijah. And before you say anything else, she paused. I need you to understand that what I'm about to tell you cannot leave this room yet. Because if Merritt finds out you've been here, he will move faster than either of us is ready for. Elijah sat down. He put the notebook on her desk. She looked at it without touching it. He already knows, Elijah said. You saw his face in the video. Dr. Osei nodded slowly. I saw his face. So whatever he's going to do, he's already doing it. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she opened her desk drawer, pulled out a single sheet of paper, and slid it across to him. It was a printed email. Sent at 11:47 the previous night. From Professor Merritt to the Office of Academic Integrity. Subject line, formal complaint, suspected academic misconduct. Carter, Elijah T. Elijah read it once. Then again. His jaw tightened. He filed it before midnight, Dr. Osei said quietly. Before the video even hit 5,000 views. He wasn't reacting to the publicity. She let that sit. He was already afraid of you before any of this went public. Elijah set the paper down. Looked at his father's notebook. Looked at the woman across the desk who had known Marcus Carter and said nothing for 30 years and was now sitting forward in her chair like a woman who had finally decided that silence had cost enough. What did you see? Elijah said. Back then. What did you actually see? Dr. Osei opened her mouth. Closed it. And then, in a voice that had been waiting a very long time to say this out loud, she began to tell him exactly what she had watched this university do to his father, and exactly what she had done nothing to stop. The story Dr. Amara Osei told didn't come out clean. It came out in pieces, the way confessions always do, halting at the parts that implicated her, rushing through the parts that implicated others, circling back to details she had spent years trying to reframe in her own memory so they hurt less. Elijah sat across from her and let her talk without interrupting, because he had learned from his mother that the worst thing you could do when someone was finally telling the truth was make them feel watched while they did it. Marcus Carter had arrived at Caldwell University in the fall of 1992. First-generation student. Full academic scholarship. The kind of mind, Dr. Osei said, that made other mathematicians feel like they had been solving problems with the wrong tools their entire lives. He didn't just find answers. He found shorter roads to answers that nobody had thought to look for. He was assigned to Professor Merritt's research track in his second year. That was standard. Merritt took the most promising students. Everyone considered it an honor. I thought it was an honor, Dr. Osei said. I was on the same track. I thought Merritt was difficult but brilliant. I thought that was just what genius looked like from the outside. When did you stop thinking that? Elijah asked. She looked at her hands. February 1995. Marcus had come to her first. Not to the department chair. Not to the dean. To her, because she was the one person in that building who looked like someone who might understand what it meant to be targeted and not believed. He had shown her the research proposal. The one dated October 1994. The one describing in precise detail the solution to the Caldwell constant problem. The same solution Merritt had presented at an academic conference in January 1995 and was preparing to publish under his own name. He was shaking, Dr. Osei said. Not from fear. From rage. He had been holding it together for months, watching Merritt present his work, watching people congratulate Merritt, watching the department celebrate a breakthrough that Marcus had handed over in good faith because Merritt was his advisor and he trusted him. She paused. He told me he was going to file a formal complaint. He asked me if I would support him. And the silence that followed lasted long enough to become its own kind of answer. I told him I believed him, she said. I told him I thought he was right. And then I told him I couldn't put my name on anything because I was 2 years from tenure, and if I stepped into that fight I would lose everything I had worked for. She looked at Elijah directly for the first time since she had started talking. I told a 22-year-old man that his career was worth less than my comfort. And then I watched them destroy him. Elijah said nothing. He filed the complaint anyway, she continued. February 3, 1995. The department chair reviewed it and dismissed it in 6 days. 6 days, Elijah. They didn't interview witnesses. They didn't examine the notebooks. They looked at a complaint filed by a black undergraduate student against a tenured professor with an imminent publication, and they made a decision about who was more believable before they read the second page. She picked up her glasses and put them down again. 3 weeks later Marcus was served with a counter-complaint. Academic dishonesty. Fabrication of research records. They accused him of creating false documentation after the fact to support a fraudulent plagiarism claim. They accused him of doing exactly what Merritt did. Yes. And the university believed it. The university chose to believe it. There's a difference. Elijah stood up. He walked to the window. 4 floors below, students crossed the courtyard in the thin morning light, backpacks on, coffee cups in hand, moving through a campus that had no idea what had happened inside these walls 30 years ago or what was happening inside them right now. He pressed 2 fingers against the cold glass. He was expelled, Elijah said. It wasn't a question. April 1995. Conduct violation. Fabrication of academic records. The finding went on his permanent file. He was barred from enrolling at any institution in the consortium. Blacklisted from research positions. He tried to appeal twice. Both appeals were denied without hearing. She stopped. Your mother told me once that he spent 2 years trying to find a lawyer who would take the case. Nobody would touch it. He was a black student with an expulsion on his record, accusing a tenured professor at a prestigious university. There was no version of that story that the legal system was interested in. Elijah turned from the window. And Merritt's paper was published. April 1995. Same month as the expulsion. The timing was. She stopped herself. It wasn't coincidental. Elijah came back to the desk. He opened his father's notebook to the page he had marked years ago, October 12, 1994, the date written in his father's hand at the top of the page, the solution laid out below it in full. The same solution Elijah had written on Merritt's board yesterday in 94 seconds. He turned it to face Dr. Osei. I need to know if this is enough, he said. She studied the page. Alone? No. A notebook can be questioned. The date can be disputed. Merritt's lawyers will argue it's a reconstruction, that you created this after the fact to support a false narrative, the same way they said your father did. She looked up. We need corroboration. We need someone who was there. Is there anyone? She hesitated. That hesitation lasted exactly 1 second too long. There's a man named Dr. Nathan Voss, she said carefully. He was a doctoral student here in 1994. He was in Merritt's inner circle. He left Caldwell abruptly in 1996 and went to Princeton. He's been there ever since. She paused. I always believed he knew more than he said. But he never came forward and I never pushed because... Her office phone rang. She looked at it. The caller ID read, Office of the Provost. She looked at Elijah. That's not a coincidence either, he said. She picked up the phone. Dr. Osei. A pause. Her expression didn't change, but something behind her eyes went very careful very quickly. Yes. I understand. I'll be there at 10. She hung up. They want to see me, she said. This morning. About me. They didn't say. She stood up and began straightening papers on her desk with the focused efficiency of someone buying time to think. But Merritt is on the Provost's advisory board. And the Provost's office doesn't call faculty at 7:40 in the morning about scheduling. She looked at him. Elijah. Listen to me carefully. Whatever you do today, do not go back to Merritt's class. I have class at 11. I know. Don't go. If I don't show up it looks like I'm running. If you do show up he will use it. She came around the desk and stood in front of him, and for the first time she put her hand briefly on his arm. Not soft, not gentle, the grip of someone transferring something urgent. He has been doing this for 30 years. He knows how to make a student disappear inside the process. He will file additional complaints. He will have colleagues submit character statements. He will make the hearing about your behavior, not his. The moment you walk back into that classroom you hand him a stage. Elijah looked at her hand on his arm. Then at her face. You said you couldn't help my father because you were protecting your tenure. She didn't flinch. Yes. Your tenure review. When is it? A pause. I'm full, Professor. I have tenure. So you have nothing to lose now. The question sat between them like a blade. Dr. Osei held his gaze for a long moment. Outside the office window the morning had gone flat and grey, the kind of light that doesn't flatter anything, that shows every crack in every surface with perfect indifference. No, she said quietly. I don't. Then I need you to call Nathan Voss today. Not tomorrow. Today. She nodded once. Elijah picked up the notebook. He walked to the door and stopped with his hand on the frame. Dr. Osei. He didn't turn around. My father came to you 30 years ago and you sent him back into that building alone. He felt rather than heard her breath catch. I need to know that's not what's happening right now. The silence behind him lasted 4 seconds. Go, she said. I'll call Voss. He walked out into the corridor. Past the portraits. Past the brass plate with Merritt's name on it. He didn't look at it this time. He was already thinking 3 moves ahead. And somewhere on the floor above him, in an office with a view of the entire campus, Professor Sungjin Merritt was on the phone. Not with the provost, not with his lawyer, but with the chair of the Academic Integrity Committee, calmly and methodically explaining why the hearing needed to be scheduled before the end of the month. The hearing date arrived in Elijah's email at 2:47 in the afternoon. Not as a letter. Not as a formal document delivered through the Student Affairs Office with a cover sheet explaining his rights and the process and the name of the student advocate assigned to support him. It arrived as a calendar invite. Automated. Impersonal. The kind of notification that told you a dentist appointment had been confirmed or a package was out for delivery. Subject line. Academic Integrity Hearing, Carter. Elijah went still. What does that mean? He wouldn't say more. He said he needed to think. She looked at Elijah carefully. But if Merritt did this before Marcus, if there was another student, another theft, another buried complaint, then it's a pattern, Elijah said. Not an incident. Yes. And a pattern is harder to dismiss than a single allegation. The wind moved through the trees above them, bare branches scraping together with a sound like something being torn. Elijah looked at the archive building behind them and then at the mathematics building visible at the far end of the path. Merritt's name on a plaque, Merritt's portrait on the wall, Merritt's chair endowed in 1997 on the back of work that a 22-year-old black student had handed over in trust and never gotten back. How many students? Elijah said quietly, more to himself than to her. Did he do this to? Dr. Osei didn't answer. Because she didn't know. And the not knowing was its own kind of answer. Elijah's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen. A text from a number he didn't recognize, no name, just a message. Stop digging. You don't know what you're walking into. This is bigger than Merritt. He showed it to Dr. Osei. She read it twice. Her face went very carefully neutral, the way faces do when the person wearing them is deciding how frightened to let themselves appear. Who has your number? She asked. Nobody. I didn't give it to. They looked at each other. Someone in that building knows we were here, Elijah said. Dr. Osei looked at the archive building. Then at the path around them, empty now in the dying afternoon light. Then back at Elijah. And for just a moment, just a fraction of a second, he saw something move across her face that she couldn't quite suppress. Not doubt. Not fear. Warning. Go home, she said. Lock your door. Don't respond to that message. She was already moving. And Elijah. She stopped without turning around. Keep those notebooks somewhere other than your apartment tonight. She walked away before he could ask her why. He stood alone on the path as the last of the afternoon light dropped out of the sky, the anonymous text still glowing on his screen. His father's notebook under his arm, the archive building at his back holding 30 years of buried truth, and the very clear, very cold feeling that someone had just told him he was closer to something dangerous than he had realized. He started walking. Fast. Elijah didn't sleep in his apartment that night. He took the notebooks to the one place he trusted completely. A 24-hour laundromat 4 blocks from campus run by a Ghanaian woman named Afia Mensah, who had known his mother since before Elijah was born, and who asked no questions when he walked in at 9 in the evening carrying a shoebox and asked if he could sit in the back room until morning. Afia looked at his face, looked at the shoebox, and pointed to the back room without a word. She brought him tea at 11. At midnight she turned the front sign to closed and sat at the counter with a paperback novel, and let him exist in the particular safety of someone else's quiet. He spent the night photographing every page of every notebook. He uploaded everything to 3 separate cloud accounts. He emailed compressed files to Dr. Osei, to his mother, and to a personal account he had created that morning under a name that wasn't his. He was not his father. His father had carried the only copies of his work in a single shoebox and trusted a university process to protect him. Elijah was not going to make the same mistake. By 6 in the morning he had a response from Dr. Osei. For words. Voss called me back. He called her immediately. He'll testify, she said. She sounded like someone reporting good news while braced for the cost of it. He called at 2 in the morning. He said he'd been awake since our conversation and he couldn't. His word. He couldn't keep carrying it. A pause. He also confirmed what he hinted at yesterday. There was another student before your father. 1991. A white student named Declan Ferris. Merritt took his work on a separate theorem, presented it at a conference, and when Ferris complained the department told him he had misunderstood the nature of collaborative research and that any work produced under faculty supervision was jointly owned. She paused. Ferris dropped out. Voss was a first-year doctoral student at the time. He watched it happen and said nothing because Merritt was his advisor and he needed his recommendation to graduate. Elijah sat with that for a moment. So Merritt had a method. He refined it on Ferris. Then he used it on my father. Yes. And Voss watched both. Yes. Is he willing to put Ferris on record too? He says Ferris is in Seattle. He hasn't spoken to him in 20 years, but he has a last known contact. He's going to try to reach him today. She stopped. Elijah. This is more than I expected this quickly. The supervision log, Voss, a prior victim. If we can get Ferris to corroborate even partially, the pattern argument becomes very strong. And there it was. The thing that felt, for just a moment, like solid ground. For exactly 48 hours Elijah let himself believe they were going to be ready. Dr. Osei submitted a formal request to the Academic Integrity Committee to postpone the hearing date on the grounds of insufficient preparation time, citing the November 28 scheduling as procedurally disadvantageous to the respondent. The committee acknowledged receipt. Voss drafted a 3-page written statement that arrived in Dr. Osei's inbox by Friday afternoon. Careful, specific, devastating in its detail. Dr. Franklin Okafor, the MIT Emeritus Professor Dr. Osei had contacted through a colleague network, agreed to assemble an independent evaluation panel and confirmed availability for the hearing date. The supervision log had been formally documented and copied. The notebooks had been authenticated by a forensic document examiner Dr. Osei had worked with on a previous research dispute. The ink, the paper stock, the pen pressure all consistent with the early 1990s. For 48 hours it felt like they were building something that couldn't be knocked down. Then Monday arrived. Elijah was crossing the main quad at 8:40 in the morning when he saw the crowd. Not large. Maybe 30 students clustered near the entrance to the mathematics building, some with phones out, some just standing in the particular way people stand when they're watching something they didn't expect to see. He pushed through to the front. A notice had been posted on the mathematics building entrance. Official university letterhead. The kind of document that gets posted publicly when the institution wants to perform transparency without actually being transparent. It was a statement from the Office of Academic Integrity. It was a statement from the Office of Academic Integrity. It said that in light of the ongoing investigation into alleged misconduct by a current student, unnamed, but everyone standing in that crowd knew exactly who, and in response to concerns raised by multiple faculty members about the integrity of the advanced number theory course, the university was implementing an interim academic hold on Elijah Carter's enrollment status, effective immediately, pending resolution of the hearing. An academic hold. Effective immediately. He couldn't attend classes. He couldn't access the university library system. He couldn't submit coursework. He couldn't be on the payroll of any university-affiliated research position. Everything, his entire academic existence at Caldwell University, had been suspended with a posted notice on a building entrance before 9 in the morning on a Monday. "That's illegal," said a voice beside him. He turned. Priya Nwosu, the student from the second row who had watched him solve the equation, was standing at his shoulder reading the notice with an expression of focused fury. "They can't impose a hold before the hearing. That's a due process violation. That's prejudging the outcome." "They just did it," Elijah said. "I'm pre-law," she said. "My roommate is in the student legal clinic. This," she took a photo of the notice. "This is actionable." Elijah looked at the notice. Then at the crowd. Then at the mathematics building behind it, Merritt's name on the plaque, Merritt somewhere inside, and the cold understanding settling over him that this was not a mistake, not an administrative overreach, not a bureaucratic error that would be corrected by lunchtime. This was a message. Delivered publicly, on a board, in front of 30 witnesses. "We can make you disappear inside the process." His phone buzzed. Dr. Osei. He stepped away from the crowd to answer. "I see it," she said before he could speak. Her voice was tight. Controlled. "I've already called the Student Legal Clinic and the Faculty Senate Ombudsman. This hold is procedurally improper, and I am putting that in writing to the Provost's office in the next 30 minutes. A breath. "But Elijah, I need you to hear me. This changes the timeline. They are trying to destabilize you before the hearing. They want you reactive. They want you to do something they can document." "I know. Do you?" Her voice sharpened. Because I need you to stand in front of that building and do absolutely nothing. I need you to be so calm it frightens them. He looked at the notice. 30 students watching him. Phones up. The video already at 200,000 views and climbing, his name trending on 2 platforms, and now this, a public academic hold that every one of those students was photographing and uploading in real time. There's something I didn't tell you, Dr. Osei said. Her voice had dropped. He felt the shift immediately. What? The postponement request. The one I filed Friday asking to move the hearing date. A pause. It was denied this morning. Before the hold was posted. The committee denied it before 8 a.m. On what grounds? They said the hearing date was appropriately scheduled and that any further requests for postponement would be considered an attempt to delay proceedings. She stopped. Elijah. They denied the postponement and posted the hold in the same morning. That's coordinated. That's not bureaucracy. Someone is running this. He already knew who. Voss, he said. Has Merritt made contact with Voss? A silence that told him everything before she answered. Voss called me an hour ago. He said he'd received a communication from a university's legal office informing him that any testimony provided to a student respondent in an active academic integrity case could expose him to liability for interfering with official proceedings. Her voice was very careful now. He said he needed to speak to his own lawyer before he could confirm his participation. There it was. The ground that had felt solid for 48 hours cracked clean down the middle. Voss was gone. Not permanently, maybe. But for now, for the critical days between today and November 28th, he was unreachable behind a wall of legal caution that Merritt had built around him with a single well-timed letter. Elijah stood in front of the mathematics building with 30 students watching him and cameras pointed at his face and his father's notebooks in a shoebox in the back room of a laundromat, and a hearing date that wasn't moving and a witness who had just gone silent, and he felt, for the first time since he had walked to that board and picked up that chalk, the specific weight of understanding that brilliance was not going to be enough. His father had been brilliant too. What do we do? He asked. Dr. Osei's answer came back without hesitation. As if she had been preparing it for 30 years. We stop playing their game, she said, and we change the board. The student legal clinic was a single room on the second floor of the student union building, wedged between a counseling referral office and a printer station that was perpetually out of paper. It smelled like instant coffee and fluorescent light. The kind of room that said, we want to help you, but only within the limits of what we're allowed to do. Priya Nwosu had gotten there before Elijah. She was already seated across from a third-year law student named Tobias Ran when Elijah walked in, a printed copy of the academic hold notice on the table between them, Priya's highlighter having already moved through 3 separate clauses. Tobias looked up when Elijah entered. He was 23, small-framed, with a particular focused stillness of someone who had trained himself to think before reacting. He looked at Elijah the way people had been looking at him all morning, with recognition, with something adjacent to awe, and underneath both of those things, poorly concealed alarm. Sit down, Tobias said. Not unkindly. Urgently. Elijah sat. The hold is improper, Tobias said immediately. Imposing enrollment restrictions before a hearing outcome is a violation of the university's own Student Conduct Code, Section 4.7, which explicitly states that a respondent retains full student status until a finding is issued. I've already drafted a formal objection. He slid a document across the table. But I need you to understand something before you sign this. What? Challenging the hold directly puts your name in front of the provost's office as a combative respondent. Universities use that framing. It shifts the narrative from institutional misconduct to student aggression. He looked at Elijah steadily. So yes, we can fight the hold. But fighting it loudly may cost you more than the hold itself. So we fight it quietly, Priya said. We file the objection through the Faculty Senate Ombudsman rather than directly to the provost. It creates the same legal pressure without giving them footage of a student making demands. Tobias looked at Elijah. But that's the small problem. Tell me about the large one. Elijah told him. All of it. The notebooks, the supervision log, Voss, the legal letter that had gone to Voss, the prior student Ferris, the hearing date. Tobias listened without interrupting, making notes on a yellow legal pad in handwriting so small it looked like code. When Elijah finished, Tobias put his pen down and looked at the ceiling for 4 seconds. The letter to Voss, he said. Do you have a copy? No. Does Dr. O say? No. Voss described it to her verbally. Tobias picked his pen back up. A university legal office sending a threat letter to a potential witness in an active student conduct proceeding is itself a conduct violation. Potentially a serious one. But without the letter we can't prove it was sent, only that Voss says it was sent. He looked at Elijah. Which means right now Voss is both your most important witness and your most vulnerable one. If Merritt's legal team can characterize him as unreliable, as someone whose account shifts under pressure, they don't need to disprove his testimony. They just need to make the panel uncertain about it. Then we need the letter, Elijah said. Yes. How? Tobias tapped his pen against the legal pad. Voss received it. Voss has it. Which means the only way you get it is if Voss gives it to you voluntarily. He looked up. Which means you need to talk to Voss directly. Not Dr. Osei. You. Elijah's phone buzzed on the table. He looked at the screen. Unknown number. Same unknown number as the text from 2 days ago. He showed it to Tobias without answering. Tobias looked at it. Have you been keeping a record of contact from that number? Screenshots. Time-stamped. Good. Don't respond. Don't block it. Every message they send you is documentation. He leaned forward. Someone inside that institution is watching what you do in real time. Which means someone inside that institution is afraid of what you're going to find. He held Elijah's gaze. That is actually useful. Frightened people make mistakes. But only if you keep moving and make them react to you instead of the other way around. Elijah stood up. I need Voss's direct number. I'll get it from Dr. Osei, Priya said. She was already on her phone. And I need to know about Declan Ferris, Elijah said to Tobias. The student from 1991. If Merritt did this before my father, and the pattern can be established. A pattern of conduct changes everything, Tobias said. It moves this from a single disputed allegation to documented predatory behavior. The panel can't dismiss a pattern the way they can dismiss an incident. He paused. But Ferris is a civilian now. He has no obligation to participate. And if Merritt's people reach him before you do, they'll warn him off the same way they warned off Voss, Elijah finished. Yes. Priya looked up from her phone. I have Voss's number. Elijah took it. He looked at the string of digits on Priya's screen and thought about a man in Princeton who had watched 2 students get destroyed and said nothing for 30 years and had called Dr. Osei at 2 in the morning because he couldn't keep carrying it, and who had then gone silent the moment a legal letter arrived. A man who was not a coward, exactly. A man who was something more complicated than a coward. A man who knew exactly what he had done and exactly what it had cost and who had been living inside that knowledge for 3 decades. Elijah understood that kind of weight. He had grown up beside it. He stepped into the corridor and called the number. It rang 4 times. Then, who is this? The voice was cautious. Flat. The voice of someone who had been expecting a call they weren't sure they wanted. My name is Elijah Carter, Elijah said. Marcus Carter was my father. A silence that lasted long enough to become a different kind of answer. I know who you are, Voss said. Then you know why I'm calling. I told Dr. Osei I need to speak to my lawyer before. I'm not asking you to testify yet, Elijah said. I'm asking you one question. The letter the university legal office sent you. Do you still have it? Another silence. Shorter this time. Yes, Voss said. Will you send it to me? The pause that followed was the longest yet. Elijah stood in the corridor outside the student legal clinic and listened to a man 30 years older than him wrestle with a decision he should have made in 1995. Students passed on both sides. None of them looked at him. The fluorescent light above buzzed faintly with a sound like something that couldn't quite make up its mind. "If I send you that letter," Voss said slowly, "and they find out I sent it, they're already afraid of you," Elijah said. "That's why they sent it in the first place. You don't send a legal threat to someone who isn't dangerous to you." He kept his voice level. "Dr. Voss. My father had a notebook, a research proposal, a faculty supervision log that recorded Merritt receiving his work, and a formal complaint. He had everything. And they still destroyed him because he was alone. A beat. I'm not asking you to be brave. I'm asking you to send me one document that proves the university tried to silence a witness. That's not bravery. That's a forward button on an email." The silence on the other end changed quality. It became the silence of a decision being made rather than avoided. "I'll send it," Voss said. "To Dr. Osei's address. Not yours. If this goes wrong, I need it on record that I sent it to faculty, not directly to a student respondent." "That's fine. And Carter." Voss's voice dropped slightly. "There's something else in that letter. Something they included that I don't think they meant to include. A reference to a previous case. Case number and date. I looked it up." He stopped. "It's not Ferris. It's someone else entirely. Someone more recent." His voice had gone very careful. "Merritt did this again. After your father. There's a third student." The floor did not move. The lights did not flicker. Nothing in the physical corridor changed at all. But something shifted in the architecture of everything Elijah had believed he understood about the shape of this fight. And the shift was so significant and so cold that for 3 full seconds he couldn't locate a response. "When?" he said. 2014. "What happened to them?" "I don't know. The case number is all I have." Voss paused. "But if you can find them, send the letter," Elijah said. "Send it now before you talk yourself out of it." He ended the call. He stood in the corridor for a moment with the phone at his side, the buzz of the fluorescent light above him, the sound of students moving through the building, the knowledge sitting in his chest like something with weight and temperature. Merritt had done this 3 times. Maybe more. And every time the institution had buried it. Every time a student had walked into that building trusting a process that had already decided whose side it was on. He went back into the clinic. Tobias and Priya both looked up. "There's a third student," Elijah said. 2014. "We need to find them before the hearing." Tobias's pen stopped moving. Priya's expression went from focus to something harder and brighter, the look of someone who has just understood that what they are involved in is significantly larger than they thought. "How do we find them?" Priya asked. "We start with the case number," Elijah said. "And we move fast. Because if Merritt's people are watching everything we do," he looked at Tobias, "they already know Voss just talked to me. Which means they know the letter is coming. Which means in the next few hours they are going to do something to change the situation before we can use it." Tobias was already typing. "What's the case number?" Elijah didn't have it yet. He looked at his phone. Dr. Osei had just texted him. "Letter arrived. You need to see this immediately. Come now." He was already moving toward the door when his phone buzzed again. Unknown number. This time not a text. A photo. He stopped walking. Looked at the screen. It was a photograph of the archive building. Taken from outside. Time-stamped 2 days ago, the afternoon he and Dr. Osei had gone in to find the supervision log. He was visible in the photo. So was Dr. Osei. Someone had been watching them go in. Someone had documented it. Someone was now showing him they had documented it, not to report it, but to tell him they could report it whenever they chose. That the archive visit, the evidence they had found, the chain of events they had set in motion, All of it existed inside a frame that someone else controlled, and that frame could be used against him the moment it became convenient. He looked at the photo for 5 seconds. Then he kept walking. Because stopping was not an option, and fear was not a strategy, and his father had run out of road partly because he had faced this alone. And Elijah was not alone, not yet, not if he kept moving fast enough that the walls they were building around him couldn't close before the hearing date arrived. 9 days. He had 9 days. The letter was worse than Elijah expected. Dr. Osei had it printed and waiting on her desk when he arrived. 2 pages. University legal letterhead. Signed by someone called Associate General Counsel Philip Brandt. The language was formal, precise, and in its precision vicious, informing Dr. Nathan Voss that any testimony, written or verbal, provided to a student respondent in an active academic integrity proceeding constituted interference with official university process and could expose him to civil liability and professional sanction. Standard intimidation. Ugly but expected. It was the second page that stopped Elijah cold. A single paragraph near the bottom, almost casual in its placement, as if it had been included as an afterthought rather than the most explosive thing in the document. It referenced, in passing, a prior academic integrity proceeding, case number CI 2014-047, as precedent for the university's position on witness interference. A case that had been resolved, the letter stated, through confidential settlement. Confidential settlement. Not expulsion. Not dismissal. Settlement. Which meant money had changed hands. Which meant someone had fought back hard enough that the university had chosen to pay them to disappear rather than risk a public hearing. They settled with the third student, Elijah said. Which means the third student has a non-disclosure agreement, Dr. Osei said. Which means even if we find them, they may be legally prevented from speaking. Or they've been waiting 10 years for someone to give them a reason to break it. Dr. Osei looked at him carefully. NDAs in settlement agreements are legally binding, Elijah. If they speak publicly and Caldwell pursues it. Find me the name, Elijah said. The case number is CI 2014-047. Someone in this building filed that complaint. There's a record. I can't access active legal files. Only archived research records. Then who can? She hesitated. The Faculty Senate Ombudsman has oversight access to historical conduct proceedings. But requesting that file draws attention His phone buzzed. Priya. He answered immediately. I found him, Priya said. The third student. His name is Kwame Asante. He was a mathematics sophomore in 2014. He left Caldwell mid-semester. I found a student newspaper article from October 2014. It just says he withdrew for personal reasons. But there's a comment under the article from an anonymous account that says, and I'm reading this exactly, ask Professor Merritt what personal reasons means. She paused. The comment was posted 2 days after the article and then deleted. But it's in the web archive. Where is he now? Chicago. He's an actuary. I found his LinkedIn. Elijah looked at Dr. Osei. We need to contact Kwame Asante today. If he has an NDA. We don't ask him to testify. We ask him if he wants to. He was already moving to the door. The hearing is in 6 days. Voss has confirmed the letter exists. The supervision log places Merritt receiving my father's work in his own handwriting. The notebooks are authenticated. He stopped in the doorway. What we don't have is a pattern that the panel can't dismiss as isolated. Kwame Asante is that pattern. He left before she could argue. Priya had sent the LinkedIn profile by the time Elijah reached the quad. He looked at the photo, a man in his late 20s, professional headshot, the careful neutral expression of someone who had learned to present a surface. Elijah stared at it for a moment. Then he typed a message. Not a long one. Not an explanation. Just, my name is Elijah Carter. I'm a student at Caldwell. I think Merritt did to me what he did to you in 2014. I have the supervision log, authenticated notebooks, and a witness. I'm not asking you to break anything. I'm asking you to know it's happening again." He sent it and put his phone in his pocket. He had taken 4 steps when someone fell into stride beside him. He turned. A man he didn't recognize. 50s, gray overcoat, faculty lanyard, walking with the deliberate casualness of someone who had positioned themselves on purpose. "Mr. Carter." Not a question. "I'm Professor Gerald Oben. Colleagues with Sung Jin for 19 years. He didn't slow down. Neither did Elijah. "I want to give you some advice." "I didn't ask for any." "I know." Oben's voice was pleasant. Completely pleasant. The pleasantness of someone who didn't need to raise it. "What you're doing is understandable. What happened in that classroom was unfortunate. Sung Jin can be difficult. Nobody is disputing that." He paused. "But you are 19 years old and you are about to accuse a tenured chair of academic fraud on the basis of some old notebooks and the testimony of a man who hasn't been at this institution in 30 years. Do you understand what that looks like to a panel?" Elijah kept walking. "The hold on your enrollment can be lifted before the hearing," Oben said. Quietly. "The complaint withdrawn. You finish the semester. Nobody needs to go through what a public hearing costs everyone involved." A beat. "Sung Jin is willing to consider it." Elijah stopped. He turned and looked at Oben directly for the first time. "Merritt sent you." Oben's pleasant expression didn't flicker. "I'm offering you a way out of something that damages you regardless of the outcome." "He's offering me a deal," Elijah said slowly. 6 days before a hearing he's supposed to win." He looked at Oben with the particular clarity of someone who has just watched a hand get overplayed. Why would he do that if he wasn't afraid? Oben said nothing. "Tell him no," Elijah said. He walked away. His phone buzzed before he reached the building. LinkedIn notification. Kwame Asante had read the message. 3 seconds later, a reply. "When can you talk?" The hearing room smelled like old wood and institutional authority. Elijah arrived 7 minutes early. He wore the only button-down shirt he owned, pressed the night before by Afia Mensah, who had handed it to him that morning without comment, the same way she had handed him tea at midnight a week ago. Small dignities. He was learning to accept them. Dr. Osei sat to his left. Tobias ran to his right, a folder thick enough to use as a weapon sitting on the table in front of him. Priya Nwosu sat in the observer gallery behind them. She had no official role, but she had shown up anyway, which Elijah understood was its own kind of testimony. Merritt entered from the side door with a university attorney and 2 faculty colleagues who functioned as character witnesses. He looked at Elijah once. Just once. Then he sat down and opened a folder and did not look at him again. The panel was 5 people. 3 faculty from outside the mathematics department, 1 student representative, 1 external academic. Dr. Franklin Okafor, the MIT emeritus, sat at the far end, independent evaluator, not a voting member, but present, which mattered. The committee chair, a thin woman named Professor Adiz Kruma, called the room to order. This hearing will determine whether Elijah Carter engaged in academic misconduct during the advanced number theory session of October 14th. Professor Merritt has filed the complaint. Mr. Carter is the respondent. We will hear opening statements, evidence, and evaluation results before deliberating. She looked at both sides of the table evenly. We begin. Merritt's attorney went first. The argument was clean and well prepared. Elijah had produced a solution to a problem with no published solution using a method consistent with restricted faculty research. The implication was clear without being stated directly. A 19-year-old sophomore does not solve in 94 seconds what PhDs cannot solve in careers. Therefore, the solution was not his. Tobias responded with the supervision log. He placed it on the table and read the entry aloud. Carter, M. Promising line of inquiry constant problem. Submitted preliminary framework October 14th. Under review. written in Merritt's own hand. Submitted to the department chair in 1994. Sitting in the university archive untouched for 30 years. The room went quiet in a specific way, the quiet of people recalibrating. Merritt's attorney said the log proved only that Marcus Carter had submitted preliminary work, not a complete solution. That the leap from preliminary framework to published theorem was Merritt's own intellectual contribution. Tobias placed the authenticated notebook beside the log. Same solution. Complete. Dated October 12, 1994. 2 days before Merritt logged receiving it. The attorney opened his mouth. Tobias was already placing the forensic authentication report on top. Then Dr. Osei submitted Voss's written testimony. 3 pages. Specific. Dated. Signed. Describing in precise detail what Nathan Voss had witnessed in 1994. Marcus Carter presenting his solution to Merritt in a supervision meeting, Merritt's response, and the sequence of events that followed. Voss had not come in person, but his words were in the room. Merritt's attorney called the testimony unverifiable. Professor Krumer looked at the attorney. Dr. Voss is a Princeton faculty member of 30 years. Are you characterizing his signed statement as fabricated? A pause. We're characterizing it as unsubstantiated. Note the distinction, Krumer said, and moved on. Then Tobias placed a single document in the center of the table. The legal letter sent to Voss. Associate General Counsel Philip Brandt's signature at the bottom. The reference to case CI 2014-047 in the second page. This letter, Tobias said, was sent by this university's own legal office to a potential witness in this proceeding, warning him that testimony would expose him to civil liability. We submit that this constitutes witness interference and raises serious questions about institutional impartiality in this hearing. The room temperature changed. Professor Krumer looked at the university attorney. The university attorney looked at the letter. Something behind his eyes went very careful very quickly. Then Tobias opened his folder one final time. Kwame Asante had not come in person. His NDA prevented a public statement. But he had done something his agreement did not technically prohibit. He had submitted a notarized personal declaration stating that in 2014 he had experienced conduct by Professor Merritt that resulted in a confidential settlement with Caldwell University, and that he was aware of at least one prior incident involving a student named Declan Ferris in 1991. He named no specifics. He didn't need to. 3 students. 3 decades. One name at the center of all of it. The panel requested a recess. They were gone 40 minutes. When they returned, Professor Krumer's face had the settled quality of someone who has made a decision and is carrying it with both hands. The academic misconduct charge against Elijah Carter was dismissed. Insufficient evidence, procedural irregularities in the complaint filing, and concerns about institutional bias in the hearing scheduling. The panel further recommended an immediate external review of Professor Sungjin Merritt's 1995 publication, his tenure file, and all academic integrity proceedings associated with his department from 1991 to present. Merritt did not react visibly. He closed his folder. He stood. He walked out with his attorney and did not look at anyone. 6 weeks later his tenure was revoked. His 1995 publication was formally rescinded. The named professorship was stripped. He resigned before the external review issued its final report. Caldwell University credited Marcus Carter as the original author of the stolen theorem. A scholarship was established in his name. There was no public apology. Institutions rarely apologize. They adjust and continue. Elijah sat in the hearing room after everyone had left. Just him and the long table and the empty chairs and the particular silence of a room where something real had just happened. He took his father's notebook out of his bag. Opened it to October 12, 1994. Read the solution in his father's handwriting one more time. Then he closed it. He didn't need to carry it the same way anymore. 4 months later Elijah published his own original paper in the Journal of Advanced Number Theory. The dedication read, "For Marcus Carter." Who solved it first? Who was never wrong? Only unprotected. He was 19 years old. He had his whole career ahead of him. And in the front row of his first guest lecture at Caldwell, 3 first-generation students sat with notebooks open, pens ready, watching a young man write equations on a board with the unhurried confidence of someone who knew exactly where the solution was going. He had learned that from his father too. Not from the theft. Not from the injustice. From the notebooks. From the handwriting of a man who wrote like he was afraid of running out of time, and left behind, in a shoebox under a bed, enough truth to outlast everyone who tried to bury it. If this story moved you, if Marcus Carter deserved to be known, if Elijah's fight meant something to you, hit the like button right now. It takes 1 second and it tells the algorithm that stories like this one deserve to be seen. Subscribe if you haven't already, because we tell these stories every week. Stories about people who were told they didn't belong, who proved every room wrong. And drop a comment below. What moment in this story hit you hardest? Was it the 94 seconds? The supervision log sitting in that archive for 30 years? Or the notebook, the father who never ran out of truth? Tell us. We read every single one. This story was never just about mathematics. It was about who gets to be believed, who gets to be brilliant out loud, and what happens when a son carries his father's truth into the room that tried to erase it. Some equations take 30 years to solve. This one finally has an answer.